How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei, Daf 80 of Masechta BavaMetzia. Friends, yo friends. Daf Pei. We're making moves over here. We're making waves over here. Daf Pei of BavaMetzia. Give yourself a pat on the back. That's pretty awesome. This is 119 dafs. In my mind it was 120, but I looked the other day. It's 119, and daf kuf test isn't very big, so let's even say daf kind of 118-ish. So we're 2/3 of the way. That's really awesome. That's really awesome. Really awesome. Give yourself a pat on the back. You might hear some fighter jets flying over by. Apparently, they are preparing for Yom Ha'atzmaut. I was under the impression that they weren't doing that flyover thing this year because of the war. I was actually looking forward to that because fighter jets make a lot of noise, and you know my position on that. I prefer the less noisy thing. So I generally actually don't really like the flyover thing. I guess what's it called? I guess if somebody ever had to ask, like, what's an unpopular opinion that you have? No power washers, no fighter jets. I guess all the things that people like, I don't like. I never really thought about it that way. But I wouldn't. I think maybe that's an overgeneralization. Power washing, definitely not. Yom Ha'atzmaut flyover, not a fan. So I was kind of here at home, like minding my own business, doing my work. And then I hear like fighter jets flying over by, and I haven't been reading the news for not that long, but about like a week and a half, just because it's just too stressful. So I didn't know what was going on, so I actually looked at the news, just because it's very irregular to hear like fighter jets flying overhead in Yerushalayim, like very loud. So it's like, wait, what is going on here? And they said, they're preparing for Yom Ha'atzmaut. I thought that they weren't doing that this year. I was actually really, with all the craziness going on, I was actually looking forward to a Yom Ha'atzmaut without that. But, okay. All right. Well, I guess, okay. Yeah, well, if you hear fighter jets flying over, that's what it is. All right. So here we go. We're going to start on Daf. I should keep that in mind for unpopular positions. Every so often that question comes up, and they're like, I don't know, what's an unpopular position that I have? No street cleaners, right? No power washers, and no Yom Ha'atzmaut fighter jets. Sorry. All right. I'm sure I probably have a few others. Yeah, as I mentioned them on Babylon Talmud, I should probably keep keep that in mind for if I ever am asked that question. Like, I have a whole laundry list of them. Anyways. Okay, we're going to start off Pei at the Mishnah, all the way, clean start, all the way at the top of the Amud, Daf Pei Amud Aleph. So up the Mishnah, Hasoicher Sapore Lachosh Bahar V'Charish Babika Ua. So I think we learned 3 Mishnayos today. The middle one is very technical. So Hasoicher Sapore Lachosh Bahar. So a person who rents, the renter and the rentor. Sorry. So asocher sapar, somebody who rents a cow, lachosh bahar, to plow in a mountain, is on a mountain. V'charish babika, but the renter did not go according to plans, according to the rental agreement, and instead he plowed in a valley. Sorry, Mom. Im nishbar akankan, so if like the blade of the plowing thingy breaks, patur, so he is patur. By the way, I think I reviewed this. I had to leave the house yesterday, and so I the first part of this daf I was reviewing in somebody's car. So he rented the cow, or maybe an ox, to plow on a mountain, but he didn't go according to the agreement. Instead, he plowed in a valley. If the plowing blade thingy breaks, potter is potter, because kavachomer, right? If the blade is usable on a mountain, which is the assumption is it's a rocky, difficult terrain, so then kavachomer, it should be suitable for a valley. So if it broke in the valley, then I guess it definitely would have. If it wasn't suited for a valley, it certainly wasn't. It wasn't his fault, let's say, right? He was allowed to plow in a mountain. If it broke in the valley, that's not his fault. He didn't do anything wrong, technically. Babika v'charish bahar. Now, if he was meant to, if the agreement was for him to plow in a valley, but he plowed in a mountain, im nishbar kan chayiv. Well, in that case, if the blade thingy breaks, then he's going to be chayiv, because the agreement was for plowing in a less difficult terrain, and he then went to a more difficult terrain, and the plow broke, so he's going to be responsible for violating the terms of their agreement. Ladush bekitnis, if he rented a cow to thresh beans, which are slippery, vidash batvua, but instead he said, I'm going to thresh grain, which is less slippery, potter. So if the cow slips, he's potter. After all, the rental agreement was for a more slippery environment, and it ended up slipping in a less slippery environment. He's potter. Ladush batvua vidash bakitnis. But if the agreement was to thresh grain, which is less slippery, but he then went ahead and threshed beans, which are more slippery, and it slipped, chayev mipnei shakitnis mechalekes, because beans are more slippery. Okay. Zok the Gemara. Heicha de lo shani ba man mishalim. What if he didn't violate the terms of the agreements, right? So let's say, he rented a cow to plow in a valley, let's say. Excuse me. Okay, he rented a cow to plow in a valley, and he's plowing in the valley, and sure enough, the plow blade thingy breaks. So, which worker is responsible for it? Is it the one who's handling the actual plow, or is it the one who's guiding the cow? So who's going to be responsible? So where the renter did not violate the terms of their agreement, but the blade broke nonetheless, man mishalim, who's going to be chayv? Amr Rapapa dinokit parosh mishalim. So Rapapa says the one who is guiding, holding the reins and is guiding the ox, he's the one responsible for the damage, because I guess he guided it to a problematic area. Rav Shisha ben Davidi Amr dinokit mana mishalim. Whereas Rav Shisha ben Davidi says that it's going to be the one who's holding the plow, who's holding the blades, and pushed it too deep into the ground to a rocky area, he's going to be chayv. So the halacha is dinokit mana mishalim, that the one who's responsible for the actual plow is going to be the one responsible to pay. However, if it's a place that is particularly rocky and risky, in terms of damage, Tarvayu Mishalman, so they both need to pay, because it could have equally, it could have they could be equally responsible in that the person handling the plow may have put it down too deep and then it broke. But then again, if it's a rocky area, maybe the person who was leading the cow led it to led it to a place or let's say if you would have led it to in a different direction, then it wouldn't have been as rocky. Like he didn't navigate the rocks well. So they both are responsible in that case. Rabbi Yochanan says, so says Rabbi Yochanan, if a fellow sells a cow to his friend, so Shimon sells a cow to Reuven, and he tells Reuven, this cow is a gorer. Nashchonesi, it's a biter. Baitonesi, it's a kicker. Ravtzonesi, it collapses on things and breaks them. Wow, you're really getting a Metzia over here. Now, out of those 4, only one of them was actually true, right? Let's say it was a kicker. V'sanfu bein amumin, but he listed it together with all the other ones that weren't there, right? It's not actually a biter, it's not actually a faller on stuffer, it's not actually a gorer, but it is a kicker, let's say. So if one of them is true, but the rest of them are not true, then it's a mekachtos. It's a mistake. It's a purchase made in error, right? And he can get his money back. The reason being that the buyer, Reuven in this case, said, "Wait, Shimon said that, right? That this cow was a biter. It's not a biter. He said it was a gorer. It's not a gorer. Right? He said it was a faller on stuffer. It's not a faller on stuffer. So you know what? It must also not be a kicker." Right, so in this case, when Shimon lumped them all together, so then what happens? So it ends up if only one of them is actually true, so Reuven's it can return if it turns out that it's a kicker, Reuven can return it because he'd be like, wait, you confused me. I thought, when I noticed that it's not actually a biter, it's not actually a faller on stuffer, it's not actually a gorer, I figure you were just trying to cover all your bases and basically say, look, I warned you about all these things, but I didn't think that it was actually true. I just thought that you were just trying to, legally keep yourself out of trouble. But then it turns out that actually one of them is true. I didn't, you tricked me, and he can get his money back. Mum zeh mum acher. But if what Shimon said was, it's a kicker, and there are also some other issues. So meaning he only specified one thing, and then he said, and there are also other issues. Well, then, Reuven should have been like, wait, the only thing he mentioned is that it's a kicker. Let me actually make sure, let me keep an eye on that. So in that case, ein ze mekachtos. If it turns out that it is a kicker, well, Shimon did specifically say it's a kicker. So then it's not a mekachtos. A person who Shimon sells a shifcha to Reuven, and he says, and Shimon says to Reuven, shifcha zo shotoi. It's the same kind of concept. This shifcha is a shota. She's epileptic, I think. Is that the right word? Epilepsia? Is that a thing? Maybe. Mishumemesi. She's crazy. And only one of them was true. But he grouped it together with all the other mums. And it's a mekachtos. Mumzeh. But if he specified one of them and then said, and there are other issues, well then, ein ze mekachtos. It is not mekachtos because Reuven should have looked into that specific thing that was mentioned. Amar le Rav Achabre to Rav le Rav Ashi ayuba kol hamumin alalu mau. Says Rav Achabre to Rav Ashi, what if she ended up having all of these? And what happens if she ended up having all of these mums? Right. So what if Shimon mentioned to Reuven that there's all these mums? Right? I guess going back to the cow, right? That it's a kicker, it's a gorer, it's a biter, it's a faller on stuffer, and all of them are true. Now the thing is, Reuven really only cared that it's a kicker, right? And it turns out that it is a kicker. The thing is, he makes the argument, wait, when you said that all of these things were true, I didn't realize that all of them were true. I thought probably some of them were true, some of them weren't. I didn't realize it was actually going to be a kicker. So then so what's the halacha? Amar le Rav Matchil Rav Ashi, hachi aminu b'shmei de Rav. This is what we say in the name of Rav. Ayuba kol hamumin alalu ein ze mekachtos. Look, if he said that all of these mums exist, and they in fact did exist, well, he did say that they exist, and they actually do exist, so then it is not a mekachtos, and Reuven cannot get his money back. Okay, now we get to another Mishnah. This Mishnah, let me just think for a second. This Mishnah, okay, yeah, alright. Okay, yeah, this Mishnah is kind of technical. I'm just trying to think how to explain it. Maybe let's jump in. I have a feeling I'll probably end up jumping out in a second and doing a whole bunch of stuff outside, but let's just get started on the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Soicher es hachomer, lohavi alea chitin, vevi alea sorin. Chayev. Alright. Yeah, this is kind of a tricky Mishnah. There's like a lot that you have to read into it. It's Taka Machlokas Abaye and Rav in the Gemara, and Rashi explains it based on Abaye, so we'll explain it that way also, but there's like a bunch of stuff. Okay, so again, Soicher es hachomer, lohavi alea chitin, vevi alea sorin. Chayiv. Tvu vevi alea teven chayiv. Mipnisha nefach koshek masoi. Lavi lesach chitin vevi lesach sorin potter. V'mosef al maso chayiv. V'cham yosef al maso v'ei chayiv. Sum chesom mishum meir so l'gomol shlosh kabin l'chomer. Okay, yeah, it's kind of a tricky Mishnah. I don't know. Okay, let's explain stuff outside. All right. First of all, Chevra, we've been talking about currencies, right? We've been talking about Isars and Pundions and Maz and all sorts of things. So now we're going to talk about measurements, okay? A core is 30 sa'as. I think I'm getting this right. A core is 30 sa'as. One sa'a is 6 kavs. A lesech is half of a core. And we're actually going to see another word for lesech later on in the daf, which is adriv. Okay. So now, if the renter rents a donkey, and the rental agreement is that the donkey he's gonna rent the donkey for wheat. Okay, the assumption is it's a lesech of wheat, half a core of wheat, 15 sa'a of wheat. Okay, so now the thing is, if he loads it up with a lesech of barley, 15 sa'a of barley, so that would be okay. That alone would be okay according to everybody. It's completely fine, as the Mishnah itself says, right? If he rents a donkey to put on it 15 sa'a of wheat, and he puts on 15 sa'a of barley, that's completely fine. Now, barley weighs less than wheat, okay? So if he rents the donkey for 15 sa'a of wheat, so to put on 15 sa'a of barley, I mean, what's the big deal? It weighs less, so that's fine. Now, here's the thing. This is where things get a little trickier. The thing is, so the question is, when it comes to a donkey, what's like the important thing in terms of like violating the agreement, because you kind of, it makes things more difficult for the donkey, and you weren't allowed to do that kind of a thing. That's probably kind of vague. The question is like, what's important for a donkey? Is it more difficult? Does the donkey only care about the weight of things? What about the bulk of things, right? So according to Abaye, the bulk of things is actually just as important as the weight of things. So therefore, if he rents the donkey for 15 sa'a of wheat and he uses it for 15 sa'a of barley, that's okay, because if 15 sa'a of wheat and 15 sa'a of barley are equally bulky. So in terms of the bulk, it's the same. In terms of the weight, the barley is less, and he was allowed to put wheat, which is more heavy, so then that's completely fine. The thing is, what if he adds more than 15 sa'a of barley, right? So let's say he has 15 and a half sa'a of barley. Now this gets kind of to Machlokas Abaye and Rava. What if he puts in 15 and a half sa'a of barley? So now let me also point out that, so I said that barley weighs less than wheat, okay? So if you have 15 sa'a of wheat or 15 sa'a of barley, 15 sa'a of barley is going to weigh less. How much less? Not that much less. If you add a sa'a of barley so that it's 16 sa'a of barley, 16 sa'a of barley is already the same weight as wheat, okay? So 15 sa'a of barley weighs less than 15 sa'a of wheat, but 16 sa'a of barley is equal to 15 sa'a of wheat. Now, one sa'a is 6 kavs. So 15 and a half sa'a of barley would be 15 sa'ah and 3 kavs. So now, going back to where we were about a minute or two ago. So we said that if you have 15 saw of wheat and 15 saw of barley, so the bulk is going to be the same. Okay, to carry 15 saw of something is going to be equal bulk. But in terms of how much it actually weighs, the barley is going to weigh less. Now, what if you were to add, let's say, half a saw of barley more? So it still weighs less than the wheat, right? Because we said it's 16 saw of barley is equal to 15 saw of wheat. So, but you have 15 and a half saw of barley, so it still weighs less than the wheat, but it's bulkier now than the wheat. So, according to Abaye, that's a problem, right? If you have, because the bulk is just as relevant as the weight, according to Abaye. So, 15 and a half saw of barley is already going to be a problem, even though it still weighs less than the wheat, which is what they agreed to, but the bulk is more, and that's going to be a problem according to Abaye. Rava says no. No, Rava says that the bulk only becomes an issue once you have 16 saw of barley, because 16 saw of barley weighs the same as the wheat, but now you have the extra bulk of the extra saw, so it's only at that point that the bulk, right, once they're the same weight. So now the problem is that that the agreement was for 15 saw of wheat. Now you put on 16 saw of barley, which is the same weight as the wheat, but it's bulkier now. So, the agreement was only for the weight and bulkiness of wheat, but while he has with the barley the weight of the wheat, but the barley is bulkier than the wheat because it's 16 saw, and at that point it becomes a problem. That's basically the machlokas between Abaye and Rava. As I said, the Mishnah we're going to explain according to Abaye, and we'll see in the Gemara how Rava understands the Mishnah. So now with that, right, I told you I was probably going to end up going outside. There was just like a bunch of stuff that had to be explained: sa'as and lesechs and kavs and kors and. Okay, so here we go. So if a renter rents a donkey, and the agreement was for wheat, and you'd be allowed to put a lesech, a half a core of wheat on this donkey. Vehevi aleh seorin, but he didn't put wheat on the donkey. He put barley on the donkey, and he didn't put 15 saw of barley on the donkey. He put a little bit more than 15 saw of barley on the donkey. So even though it is less weight than the wheat, but it's bulkier now than the wheat, chayav, so he's going to be chayav for that. So you have to read into that a little bit. Tevua vevi aleh tevin chayav, and the same thing would apply, not necessarily between wheat and barley, but if, for example, it was to bring grain and he brought straw, you would have the same situation, that the straw weighs less, but if you add more, then it's going to be bulkier. Because the bulk of the bulk of the load is just as important as the weight of the load, and even if by adding half a saw of barley, it's still going to weigh less than the lesech of wheat, but it's bulkier, and that's significant. Lavi lesech chitin vevi lesech sorin potter. So as we said now, but if he didn't add anything, if the agreement was for half a core of wheat, and instead he brought half a core of barley, which is the same bulkiness and it weighs less, well then he's going to be potter if anything happens to if the animal suddenly collapses. It's not his fault. He's taking it easy on the donkey. V'imosif. Now, getting back, essentially, it's a funny mission because you got to go back and forth and add things. Now, v'imosif. So when we talked about in the Reisha, at least this is how Abaye would explain it. Rav would explain it differently. So at least in the Reisha, when we talk about if you added on to the barley, then you're going to be chayiv. So v'imosif amaso chayiv. So if you add on to the barley, right, half a saw of barley, so then you're going to be chayiv, even though it weighs less than the wheat. V'chama Yosef amaso v'yehei chayiv. Okay, how much do you have to add on to be chayiv? Sum chisom mishum Reb Meir saw legamol. Shlosha kabin l'chamer. Sumcha says the name of Reb Meir that it would be one full saw, 6 kavs if we're talking about a camel, but Shlosha kabin l'chamer, half of a saw, 3 kavs for if we're talking about a donkey. So now says the Gemara. So now we're going to get into this machlokes Abaye and Rava. Idmar we stated Abaye Omer kosher kim masa'ui. So Abaye says that when it says she'anefach kosher kim masa'ui, so that the bulk is just as significant as the weight, and therefore, if you add barley and now it's bulkier, so then even though it's less weight but it's more bulk, well, that's significant, and if the animal collapses, you're going to be responsible for that. Rava Omer kosher lima sa'ui. Rava says no, it only becomes an issue, right? The bulk is only an issue when it's in addition to the load, right? So meaning if the agreement was for half a core of wheat, so then and then he puts barley on it and he adds more barley, he's only going to be chayav when the barley is the same weight as the wheat, which means that he had to add a saw, and only at that point is the bulkiness significant, when it's the same weight as the wheat but more bulk. Tanan, where am I? Tanan Abaye Omar kosher kimaso. Wait, what? Abaye Omar, I started from the beginning. Abaye Omar kosher kimasoy tanan. Rava Omar kosher limasoy tanan. Abaye Omar kosher kimasoy tanan. Nafcha kitakla, because bulk is just as significant as weight. V'mosif shlosha kabin, and even if you just add half a saw, 3 kavs, which would still be less weight than the barley, but it's bulkier. It would still be less weight than the wheat, but it's bulkier than the wheat. Chayiv. Abaye would say you're already chayiv for that because you're adding bulk, and bulk is just as significant as weight. Rava Amar kosher lima soy tanan. Rava says that it's the bulk is significant. I don't know exactly how to translate, but I don't know if I'm translating literally. But kosher lima soy, I'm kind of basically understanding, meaning the bulk becomes an issue only when it is the same weight as the wheat, right? So if you have 16 saw of barley, so that it's the same weight as the wheat, but it's also of course now bulkier, so then only then is it going to be an issue. But if you have half a saw of extra barley, right? So only 3 kavs of extra barley, so it still weighs less than the wheat. Well, even though it's bulkier, that's not going to be a problem. Okay. It has to be the same weight in order for the bulk to become an issue. Takla ki takla, because weight is weight is weight, and if the barley weighs less than the wheat, it's still going to be acceptable. Only once the weights are equal does the bulk become an issue. V'nafcha ave tosefes, like takla ki takla v'nafcha ave tosefes, right? That when you have the weight of the barley and the wheat equal, well, only at that point. Well, now the barley is bulkier than the wheat, and it weighs the same, but it's bulkier. That's going to be a problem. Tanan, lovi lesech chitin vevi lesech sorin, potter. Our Mishnah had said that if the agreement was for half a core of wheat, and he brings half a core of barley, potter. Okay, right? The Mishnah had said if the agreement was for half a core of wheat, and he brought half a core of barley, it's potter, because it's the same bulk and less weight. But if he adds onto the barley, he's going to be chayiv. My lav shloshes kabin. So what does that mean? If you add, even if you just add 3 kavs, doesn't have to be a whole saw. So even if you just add 3 kavs, like Abaye is saying, lo. So Rava would say no. If you add a saw, then it would be a problem. But right, because then it's the same weight but more bulk. But what do you mean? The Mishnah says when we're talking about adding to the wheat and to the barley and being chayiv, how much are you adding? 3 kavs for a donkey. So doesn't it sound like we're explaining how much more you have to add, and we're saying exactly like Abaye that you have to add, right, 3 kavs already you'd be chayiv, even though it weighs less, but it's more bulk. Rava says, no, this is how you explain the Mishnah. Heicha de lo shani. Where there is no difference, meaning chitin vevi chitin, sorin vevi sorin, where the agreement was for wheat and he brought wheat, where the agreement was for barley and he brought barley. Kama Yosef Amasov v'yechayev. If he then adds on top of what he was supposed to be able to bring, right? I mean, if he's supposed to bring wheat, so we're talking about a lesech of wheat. How much? If he adds, or how much does he add? He'll be chayev. Sumchasov mishum meir saw legamos shel shekabim lechomer. That 6 calves for a camel and 3 calves for a donkey, but that's specifically when he's bringing the species, the whatever that he if he's supposed to bring wheat, he's bringing wheat, but he added half a saw, so then that is a problem. So then if he adds half a saw, so then that is a problem. But in the scenario where the agreement was for wheat and he brings barley, then it would have to be a whole saw in order for it to be a problem, because only at that point would it be the same weight, and then the bulk becomes a factor. Fine. Toshma, lavi lesech chitin vehevi lesech vehevi sheish esrei sorim chayiv. You hear this? If the agreement was for 15 saw of wheat and he brings 16 saw of barley, is chayiv. That sounds exactly like Rava. Hashlosh is kabin potter, so you'd be potter for 3 kabins. Akash and Abaye, it's like Rava. Tigma Abaye b'mechikso. Abaye says no. When it says 16, look, there's different ways that you can weigh out the barley, right? You can have a big heaping scoop. You can have a somewhat heaping scoop, and you can have an exact scoop. You keep it level. So generally speaking, right? So when we're talking about a lesech 15 sa'a, we're talking about we're generally talking about kind of like the middle one, not the huge scoop, not the exact scoop, but just kind of a generous scoop, a fairly generous scoop. So when Abaye is talking about if you bring 15 and a half sa'a, it's going to be a problem. That's talking about 15 and a half sort of middle ground scoops. Abaye says when the Brisa says if you bring 16 scoops, it's sa'as, it's going to be a problem. That's because you're talking about exact scoops. So then you're gonna so then you're gonna have to add more. But Abaye says sort of the generally accepted scoops. We're talking about 15 and a half sa'as. All right, fine. So if somebody is schlepping stuff, so if you add an extra kav, so then that's too much, and if you get so then you're gonna we'll have to explain it what that means, that is chayiv. But you can't overburden a person who's schlepping something by a kav. Adriv la'areva, for a small boat, 15 or half a core would be too much, would be overdoing it. Kor lesvina, a whole core for a intermediate boat. Shloshes korim levorni gedola, and 3 cores for a big old boat. We said earlier, kavla katof, that if you give a porter, somebody who's schlepping stuff, an extra kav, so then that's too much. Im isa delo matzi bay bardasu l'shadye. But the Gemara says, I don't understand. What do you mean? Like if somebody's schlepping something for me and I give him too much, a kav too much, I'm chayiv. Why should I be chayiv? He's a human being. He has intellect. He knows what he can handle. If he picks it up and it's too much, he should put it down. Why is it my fault? So Abaye b'shechavto la'alter. Well, he picked it up and he collapsed immediately. That's what we're talking about. Rava says, Rava afilu tema b'shelochavto la'alter. You can even say that it's not talking about where he collapsed immediately. Lo tzricha ela la'agri yaseir. It's not that if you give an extra kav, he's not going to be able to handle it and he's going to collapse. No, but you have to pay extra for that. That's what it means. It just means you have to pay extra for it. Rav Ashi, Amar says Rav Ashi, who saver chulsha hu denokit lei. Whereas Rav Ashi says, no, it could mean that he's getting physically hurt, but the thing is, so you said, well, he's a smart person, he's got intellect, why doesn't he just put it down? Well, maybe he doesn't realize that there's an extra kav there, that it's a heavier load than usual. Maybe he just thinks, wow, this is weird, why can't I pick it up? Maybe I'm just having a weak spell, but it's not an issue with the load, it's an issue with me. So that's why he kind of keeps going, not because he realizes that it's too much and he should have put it down. He's just thinking like, why can't I handle this? This is weird, but he doesn't realize because it's actually too much. He just thinks that, he's having a weird day. And then if he gets hurt, so then the I guess employer would be chayiv. The renter, the person who's paying him would be chayiv. The person who added too much would be chayiv. Kor lasvina shloshis kor in levorni gedola. So we said 1 kor extra for a boat would be a medium-sized boat would be too much. 3 kor extra for a big boat would be too much. Amar Papa says, Papa Shmamina stam sfinos bas tlotzin korin lemanafkamina lemekachumimkar. So says Papa, the fact that by an intermediate boat, an extra kor would be considered too much, then that means that how much can a boat actually carry? 30 kor, because what would be considered too much would be 1/30 of what it normally can hold. So if we're saying that 1 kor would be too much, then that means that normally it can hold 30 kor, and then if you add 1 kor too much, then that's a problem. And what's the nafkamina? The nafkamina is for buying, right? If somebody says that I'm selling a svina, then that memela means that it can handle 30 kor. So, and then that would be the definition. Okay. Third Mishnah of the day. Kol umanin shomrei sacher hein. All craftsmen, it says Rashi that we're talking about kablonin, talking about a kablon, a consultant, somebody who gets paid for a specific project. Kol umanin shomrei sacher. So if somebody's getting paid to weave a garment and he takes the work at home. It takes the work home and he's working on it at home. Once the garment is finished, he's now a shomer sacher. He's got this garment now and he's got to take care of it. If it gets stolen, he's going to be chayiv. He's a shomer sacher. And we treat these workers as a shomer sacher until it gets returned to the person who employed them, until it's handed over. But if they convey to the employer, to the owner, that I'm done with my work, come, pick it up, pay me whenever you pay me, but he's not saying like I'm not giving it back to you until you pay me. If that's the case, then again, he's a shomer sacher. But if he says, look, I'm done, I want you to take it back, right, and pay me whenever you pay me, but like my payment is not connected to my to my responsibility for this garment, well then he's a shomer chinam. And of course the question in the nafkamina is yichai for gneva v'aveda. So if he says, if they said, Tolash shelcha, look, take back your garment, or take back whatever the work is, v'avemos, and then you bring me money, shomer chinam, meaning he separates the payment from the watching of the responsibility for the item, so then he's a shomer chinam. Shmor li v'eshmor lach shomer sacher. If the arrangement is, you guard for me and I'll guard for you. So I think the simple explanation, the simple understanding is that, they're basically each getting benefit, right? Meaning the one who's guarding it is also getting benefit from the fact that the other person is going to guard for him. So he's a shomer sacher. Shmor li v'amar hanach lefanai shomer chinam. If Shimon says to Reuven, can you wash this for me? And Reuven says, put it in front of me. So then he's a shomer chinam, right? He's basically saying, can you wash this for me? And he's saying yes. That's how we understand it. For now, at least. Ilveyu ala mashkon shomer sacher. If Shimon lends Reuven $1,000 and Reuven gives Shimon a collateral, so Shimon is a shomer sacher for that collateral. Why? What's he getting in reward? So Rashi says it's the schar mitzvah, because he's doing a mitzvah of lending. So that's the reward that he's getting for it, and he's watching it, so he's a shomer sacher. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hilveyu ma'os shomer chinam. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, it depends. If Shimon lent Reuven $1,000, so then if Reuven gives him a collateral, if Shimon lends Reuven $1,000, Reuven gives him a collateral, he's not a shomer sacher for that. He would be a shomer chinam. Hilveyu peiris shomer sacher. But if what Shimon lent Reuven was fruits, now of course we'd have to be concerned, of course, after Ezu Neshech, Batsah, but anyways, if Shimon lent Reuven fruits, now fruits are something that can go bad. So in a certain sense, he's like, there's some kind of benefit in lending these fruits so that they don't go bad. So then, in that case, if Reuven gives Shimon a collateral, it would be considered a shomer sacher. Abba Shalom says, Abba Shol, Rashi Adam la'askim ashkonu shel ani lios posek v'olich olav mipnei shu k'meshiv aveda. That if Shimon lends money to Reuven, and Reuven is a poor person, and Reuven gives a collateral to Shimon, so he says, Rashi Adam la'askim ashkonu shel ani, Shimon would be allowed to rent out that collateral in order to get payment for renting it out, and then that payment would chip away at the outstanding debt. And then Shimon's basically renting it out and using the rental payments to chip away at the outstanding balance. It's like he's returning a lost object, I guess, in a certain sense. I guess the point is that, like, if Reuven is a poor person and he needs to borrow money from Shimon and he gives a collateral, how's he going to get that collateral back? By paying Shimon, but he's a poor person. But if Shimon lends out that collateral, people are paying him to use it, and then that money is going, he's deducting that from the outstanding debt. So then that it's like getting closer to Reuven, to having that collateral returned to Reuven. Says the Gemara, Lema Masnisin Delokra Meir. Let's say that our Mishnah is not like Reb Meir the Tana, because Reb Meir says, we've seen this a few times, Socher Ketzed Mishalim. How do we treat a renter? Is a renter like a Shomer Chinam? Is a renter like a Shomer Socher? Reb Meir Omer Kishomer Chinam, Reb Yehuda Omer Kishomer Socher. Reb Meir says that a renter is like a Shomer Chinam, and Reb Yehuda says that a renter is treated like a Shomer Socher, and the assumption is that the Kablan is considered like a socher. Okay? And therefore, if we're saying that a socher is like a shomer chinam, and Reb Meir says that a socher, if we're saying that a Kablan is who's doing his work and then finishes it is considered like a shomer socher, so we want to assume then that a socher would be like a shomer socher. So that would be unlike Reb Meir, who says that a socher would be a shomer chinam. So again, let's say that our Mishnah is unlike Reb Meir. The Tanya Socher, Kates, and Mishalim. How do we treat a renter? Reb Meir Omer Kishomer Chinam. Reb Meir says like a Shomer Chinam, not a Shomer Socher. Reb Yehuda Omer Kishomer Socher. Reb Yehuda says that we treat a renter like a Shomer Socher, and which is what our Mishnah is saying about a Kablan, that he's like a Shomer Socher. Afilu Temer Reb Meir. You can even say that our Mishnah is like Reb Meir. Ba'yanoyo dikoshavik kule almo ve'ogir le'ledidei. That even though by a socher, Reb Meir says that a socher is like a shomer chinam, but over here by a worker, the hana that the worker gets, that the client out of all of the competition chose him, that hana is what makes him a shomer socher. So again, by Yanoy with that pleasure, with that benefit, dikashavik kule alma, that the client left aside all of the competition, the ogir ledide, and hired him specifically. Havilave shomer socher. That's why it'd be a shomer socher. If that's the case, use the same logic then by a socher. Socher nami by Yanoy dikashavik kule alma mogir ledide. With that benefit, that ano, that the renter could have rented out his thing to, lots of people. There was high demand, but he rented it to him. So with that, I know he should be a shomer sacher as well. So Ella, I feel to Reb Meir. So rather, if you want to say that the Mishnah is still Reb Meir, it could be Reb Meir. So then, what's unique about a kablan, about a worker? By anoya delo dekayoyiv le tvei purta ve'ilove shomer sacher. Well, if I understand correctly, basically, a kablan is being paid for his work. Now, I think the point is it's like subjective in a certain set. Like, what's the literal value of an hour of a person's time? It's not exactly an exact science. So because he's essentially probably going to end up taking a little bit more than the exact science of what his time is worth, so that's kind of the benefit that he's getting. Therefore, he's a shomer sacher. But socher nam, you could say the same thing about a renter. Maybe the renter is getting a good deal, right? Maybe the renter is actually getting a great deal. It's not that expensive, and he's getting great value for money. So maybe in that, so therefore that should be considered a shomer sacher, not a shomer chinam. Rather, you could say to Meir, it's the benefit that, well, he's not going to have to chase after the client to pay him, because after all, he has unless, we said, well, if he would say, just take the garment and pay me later, then he would not be a shomer sacher, he'd be a shomer chinam. But absent of that, he's a shomer sacher. Why? Well, because he's saying, look, I have the garment, I know that he's not getting back his garment until he pays me, so I know I'm not going to have to chase after the client to pay me, because I know that inherent in him getting back his garment, he's going to pay me. So that benefit of not having to chase after him for the payment, that is what makes the worker, the kablan, a shomer sacher. Alternatively, there's another way you can explain how this Mishnah is like Reb Meir, because actually Reb Meir's opinion is that a socher is like a shomer socher. Kidmachlif Rabba Baravua, it's like Rabba Baravua flips it around. We've seen this before. Vitani, and he teaches socher ketzad. What's ketzad misham? What's halacha by a socher? Reb Meir omer kishomer socher. That actually it's Reb Meir who says that a socher is like a shomer socher. Reb Yehuda omer kishomer chinam. Reb Yehuda says that we treat a socher like a shomer chinam. But Reb Meir says that it's like a shomer socher. So if that's the case, then this Mishnah is taka Reb Meir. And I guess the vested interest in explaining the Mishnah like Reb Meir is because Stam Mishnah is Reb Meir, so that would kind of just make sense, sort of in context. Okay, friends, that was Daf Pei of Masechta BavaMetzia. We learned 3 Mishnayos. The first Mishnah that we learned today talked about, all of the Mishnayos really, I guess, talked about, I guess not necessarily the third one, but violate, right. When there's sort of a condition, right, the terms of a rental, and a person who doesn't stick with those terms. So we talked about if you rent a donkey for the valley, but you're in the mountains, so depending on what happens, so you might be responsible for that. If you're supposed to have wheat, but you have barley, but barley weighs less, but it's bulkier. We saw the machlokas Abaye and Rava. Abaye says that sort of the bulk in and of itself is significant. Rava says the bulk is only significant once it's the same weight. And then we got to this Mishnah about a Kablon, and is he then considered a Shomer Chinam or a Shomer Socher? We got into machlokas between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. The Reb Meir says that a Socher is like a Shomer Chinam, and Reb Yehuda says that a Socher is like a Shomer Socher. Then we saw though at the end the opinion of Rabbi Baravu. Taka flips it around. The Reb Meir says that a Socher is like a Shomer Socher, and Reb Yehuda says it's like a Shomer Chinam. Anyways, that was that pay. Hope you enjoy. Peace out.